Welcome, beautiful souls. This is WTF What's the Frequency? Today, we're diving into the dynamic realm of vibrational frequencies with an extraordinary guest. Meet Greg Becker, a visionary born in St. Paul, Minnesota, with an insatiable curiosity for energetic realities and conscious expansion. Greg's journey, marked by personal experiences and his mother's profound influence, has propelled him to explore energy's untapped potential. As a filmmaker, Greg co-produced The Living Matrix, a groundbreaking documentary delving into the healing power of vibrational frequencies. But his journey didn't stop there. Today, we're unraveling the mysteries of natural frequencies, the dance of vibration, and how light and sound serve as carriers of reality's hidden truths. Fasten your mental seatbelts. I'm Vanessa Alston, and this is WTF What's the Frequency? Get ready to ride the waves of vibrational frequencies as we welcome Greg Becker to the show.
Hello, Vanessa. Thank you for a marvelous introduction.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to dive straight in because this is such a fascinating subject. And I've got so many things that I want to ask you. So, the first thing I want to ask you is what are natural frequencies and why are they important?
Well, there's a very large topic of conversation here. Natural frequencies are really those frequencies that occur just naturally in nature. Probably the most important one is what's known as the Schumann frequency. It's roughly about 7.8 hertz. And that's found throughout the earth, everywhere in the earth. And what happens wherever there's a lightning strike, that vibration that's created from lightning sets up a vibration that travels all the way around the earth. And there's something in the neighborhood, I've forgotten the exact number, but there's multiple hundreds of lightning strikes that occur somewhere in the world. It's just happening constantly, and it's creating this vibration that comes across at 7.8 hertz. Now, what they've found is the human body has a very difficult time when it's not able to be a part of the 7.8 hertz, the Schumann frequency. And actually, if you go and Google Schumann and you look at his research, you'll find that what he did was he took students and he put them in a cave underground because the frequency was not available. And what they found over time was people became disoriented, they became a bit depressed. There was an enormous negative consequence to not having this frequency present. He then introduced the frequency and all of those symptoms were alleviated. So that was the first clue that this frequency has an effect.
Wow, that's fascinating. Tell me more about that.
Well, it's a fascinating topic, and if you go back and look at that research, you can see, and then this is just one particular frequency that's been studied to some extent. There's a rumor now, I haven't been able to substantiate this, that when astronauts go up into space, they have a similar problem. They're no longer within this envelope that's occurring on the Earth, the 7.83 hertz that's happening, the Schumann frequency. So they actually found that they had to put a frequency generator into the capsule to alleviate the problems the astronauts were having. So when they're traveling in space, they've got this 7.8 hertz happening with them.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Now, talk to me about electromagnetic frequency and how it can mess with our own, what we say as healers, aura, but quantum scientists call it the morphogeneric field.
Well, there's a whole area of research here, and what's happening is you have to take a step back and look at the fact that we're all energetic beings. The fact that we have this physical body is just sort of an aside. I mean, Albert Einstein said it the best. He said reality is just an illusion. It's a very persistent one, but it is just an illusion. It's all energy. Everything is really a state of vibration and a state of energy. So when you introduce these outside influences, the outside frequencies, these outside energies, they will have an effect upon you because you are an energetic being. And this gets back to something about frequencies as well. Frequencies are very interesting. In my mind, a frequency is like the address on an envelope. Okay? If you want to talk to the heart, for example, that's a very specific frequency. You can dial in that frequency and you can beam that frequency to someone, and that frequency is energy. Energy is frequency. They're totally intertwined. They are the same thing. And there's if if you talk to a physicist, they will say, yeah, energy and frequency, they're tied together, and there's a very specific relationship, and there's that mathematical formula for it. And as you increase your frequency, you increase your energy. But what's important is the frequency will dial into a specific part of the body. So if you want to talk to the heart, there's a frequency for that. And when you send that frequency, and you're sending energy into that particular spot, that particular organ on an energetic level. But now, what's more important to me, what's really interesting is when you couple this with information, when you start to add, well, what else is there? Because this frequency is like, again, like a letter, like the old fashioned mail that we used to use, where you actually physically wrote an address on an envelope. That is a way to address that particular spot. But now you can send additional information inside that envelope. You can carry information onto that wave of frequency, that wave of energy, and you're bringing that information to that particular spot. So
This is fascinating because this unravels the things that a lot of people say to people like me, healers that can tap into the human frequency and can affect the human frequency. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I just want you to give us your take on exactly what vibration is, because this is a bit mind melting for a lot of people.
well, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about vibration, and it's kind of one of those, it's become a term that sort of has been bounced around quite a bit. But in my mind, vibration is really the sum total. And I'm looking at it from a person standpoint. I mean, everything does vibrate. There's no question about that. If you talk to any physicist, everything is about vibration. There's no discussion about that. But in terms of the average person, now you want to say, oh, I have a certain vibration. That vibration is the sum total of all of your energetic levels that are happening at any given time. For example, your brain is obviously giving off energy that's being measured with EKG, with EEG, excuse me, EKG for your heart. They're constantly measuring these electrical impulses and signals that are sending off from the body. So all of that is a combination of your vibration. It's your thoughts, it's your feelings, it's all of these things combined together. So it's your vibration that you're having. And naturally, these things change over time. You go through experience. It changes on a daily level. It changes even faster than that. Someone yells at you and you have a change, and it's obviously changed your energy levels, your vibration. It changes those things. So vibration is constantly in a state of movement. It's nothing is fixed in vibration. It's always in motion.
That's really interesting because I deal with people who are suffering from anxiety and depression. And they say, I feel like I've got the weight of the world on my shoulders because their vibrational level is really, really low. And my job is to lift them up again and to remove the negative energy, the thoughts and emotions that are trapped in their bodies that are affecting their mind, body, and soul and show up as sort of physical symptoms. So it's amazing that you mentioned that, because there's so much talk about raising your vibrational frequency. How are some ways that we can all raise our vibrational frequency?
Well, this is a big topic of conversation. There's a lot of tools that you could utilize, and obviously some of the ones that have been around for a long time, things like meditation, that when they're practiced over a period of time will stabilize your energy fields and help you increase your vibration. There's certainly different supplements you can use. There's different tools that recently have come out, energetic tools that related to quantum healing. Go visit a quantum healer. They're a wonderful way to raise your vibration. I've had multiple experiences with that and absolutely love it. But but I think this whole idea of raising your vibration is important, but people need to realize, and I think there's a lot of people who try to do it just from a mental perspective, and certainly that has an effect. The mental energy has a very strong effect, but you have to bring everything else with it. And let me give you an example. This is one of my favorite examples for a combination. If you think of a rose, if you wanted to have a mental picture in your mind of a rose, your mind is now sending out this energetic frequency, this energetic pattern of a rose, because you have energy emanating from your brain. That picture is going out with your brain energy. But now, as you also feel about that, that you have to check in with your feelings. How do you feel about that rose? Maybe you absolutely love roses. They remind you of your first lover who gave you this wonderful bouquet of roses, and they're fantastic, and they bring a very positive emotion to you. But maybe as a young child, you fell into a rose bush, and now you absolutely have a pattern that's completely different from this positive love emotion for roses. So in both cases, you have a picture of a rose that's being emanated, but you have two different vibrations that are occurring. One that has this very positive energy and one that's completely different. So that's an example of how you have to incorporate these other areas of your being when you're trying to change your vibration. It's not just a mental affair.
This is fascinating stuff, Greg, but I want to go back to the point where your mother had a profound influence on you by her own experience. And is that what set you on this sort of path to find out more about nature's vibrational frequencies and how they could help us all?
Well, I will tell the story about my mother in just a moment, but there are things that happened to me prior to even really hearing the story from my brother. But and I'll give you an example. At a young age, probably around 5 years old, I was outside playing with my older brother. And my older brother had a football, and he was throwing this football to his friend, and they were standing, you know, across from each other. And because I was the younger brother, they wouldn't let me play. So I started to run perpendicular to when they threw the football, I would run underneath. They threw it again, I would run underneath. And so I was just running back and forth underneath this football. And just as I was starting to begin another trip across the grass, something shifted within me, and I had this entire experience open up to me where I saw myself running underneath the football, and I slid to the ground because my brother threw the football too low, and it hit me right in the eye. And just as soon as that finished, I snapped back to reality. I was there in the same position I was, waiting to run. And I ran because my brother was throwing the football. And that exact thing that I visualized happened. I slid to the ground, the football hit me in the eye. And I was stunned. My brother came over and said, are you okay? What happened? You worried about, he was worried about my physical, state. Something happened to your eyes. But what was really shocking to me was, what the heck was that? How did that happen? Why did I see all of that prior to this all happening? So events like that have happened in my life, not consistently, but they're there as a chain throughout my life. But what's really interesting, I think, about these kinds of experiences is not that they make me different. I think everyone has these kinds of experiences, but they're filed away. They're put away and they're suppressed. And actually, it wasn't until maybe 25 years ago I remembered that experience. So for the longest time, that happened to me, but was not part of my conscious mind. It just wasn't there. So it's an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, it's fascinating because being a healer, I had lots of experiences like that as a child, but I'd get premonitions of things that were going to happen. And, it's not very good for a 5-year-old child to be saying, I think granddad's going to die. And then,
Mm-hmm.
that the very next day we get a phone call saying, unfortunately, he's passed over. It's not always received very well. And yet, you know, as you say, everybody has experiences like this, but we're not taught to pay attention to them. We're taught that they're not real, that we shouldn't pay attention, and that sometimes perhaps we're just being a bit paranoid. So it's great to hear you talk about that. Now, the next thing I want to ask you, because I'm going to come back to that a bit later, you've mentioned that light and sound are carrier waves for information. What do you mean by this, and how does that process work?
Well, this goes back to the same idea that really that combination of brain and emotional energies, because you're sending out this energy field. It's there. Science knows this. There's no doubt about that. You can measure these energy fields. They're being emanating all the time. But how you think, what you're thinking of, what you're feeling, those are embedded into the carrier wave. That's, in my mind, energy. That's the information component of this energy wave that's going out. So when you create any kind of an energy wave, anything that creates an energy wave, everything from your cell phone to, everything is basically constantly sending out a matter wave or an energy wave of some type, and it's carrying this information component. How did people feel when they created this particular thing? All of that is embodied with this energetic frequency. And one of the first reasons I got into this in my for over 35 years, I've been involved in film and video production. And I realized at one point that the whole energy of the team is just intertwined with what's being recorded at that particular moment. Of course, you have the emotional energy of the actors. Of course, that's part of the equation. But you also have how the sound man feels today. Is he in a good mood, or is he really pissed off because his equipment isn't working the way he wants, and he didn't get the white lunch that he wanted, and now he has an effect on that. All of these things are affecting this overall field that's occurring in this studio at this moment in time when we're recording this particular scene of action. So there's a field, it's a quantum field of all these vibrations that are happening with all of these different people at that particular moment. And you're recording this because it's going on to film. So it's an active recording mechanism. So to me, that was a very fascinating idea that I became aware of. Just that is the sort of the core essence of this idea that energy and frequencies are carrying information. And that's exactly how it feels. So if you walk into a room and you immediately make eyes with somebody and you have an instant connection, that's information being passed on an energetic field. It's a vibration, yes, but it's also like, oh, that person, there's a synchronicity that's happening. There's a thing in the field that says, yes, this person has something, or there's something there that I need to go over and talk to that person and find out what is going on there.
I love that, because I talk to people about this all the time, and we've all experienced, negative Nelly. We're all having a great time at a drinks party, and in comes negative Nelly, and everyone says, "Oh, hi, how are you?" It's like, "Oh, I've had the most terrible journey here. You won't believe what's happened to me this week," and it just brings everybody's mood down, and it's incredible how often that happens. And equally, as you've already said, somebody bounces in, full of joy. You say, "How are you?" And they say, "Do you know what? I'm great. I've had the most amazing week." And that immediately lifts you up as well as them. So it's really interesting to hear about this from a more scientific point of view. It's the reason why we should all be making an effort to be a lot more cheery and jolly. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, with all of this information out there, it's not at the forefront of everybody's thinking. It's not at the forefront of how we're progressing well-being. So in your mind, what's missing from our current scientific approach to understanding our reality?
Well, that's a wonderful question. What's really happening is science has fundamentally a problem, and it's just on the base level of what science believes. It believes that reality outside here is separate from us. It's completely agnostic. It has no relationship to me. However I think, however I feel, whatever I'm doing at a particular time, they think reality is completely separate and it's unaffected by that. And that whole idea is totally out the window. When you really start to look at what quantum represents, you start to realize, like I said earlier, about these quantum fields. Everything is intricately interrelated. Everything is part of this quantum field. So what's happening at one particular moment at one place has an effect throughout the entire planet. There's the energy that carries across is all being cross-fertilized. It's like the giant ocean of waves that are just constantly coalescing and moving across, and all of this energy is intertwined. And you and everyone else are a part of this. You're a part of the energies that are happening at any given time. So science, not only because it's material, it's only looking at the material construction. It only wants to look at what's, the molecules and what those things are when they're assembled. But they don't want to look at the fact that they have an intricate relationship to what they're doing. The only way it does come across is with the double-blind experiment. There is a realization that the placebo effect is real. The medical science, they know this. They have to do research that takes into account the placebo effect. And what is the placebo effect? It's just the person's mind saying, oh, this particular salt pill is good for me. I believe I have the real pill. I think that that person, they just gave me the real pill. And I pop in that pill and I feel so much better. And this happens all the time. It's not some kind of phenomenon that's just a little bit happening here and there. It's a major problem for the pharmaceuticals because they have to work in this whole problem where people have this response. So placebo is real. The mental energy and the energetic ability that you have to influence your body is real. It's there. It's happening. But science doesn't want to look at that. They want to only look at, say, oh, well, here's the pill that actually does that. It's an
That,
interesting thing.
that I find fascinating because my own journey led me to totally reject pharmaceuticals offering when I was struck down with degenerative arthritis and was told that my future would be, you know, not mobile, walking with a cane, and I would get, progressively worse. But pharmaceutical pills, they wanted to put me on a chemo drug, would make me less worse. They wouldn't cure me. And I really wasn't willing to accept that. So I did go down the route of, working with an energy healer who in 6 weeks was able to shift me from this place where I just couldn't walk, I couldn't move, I couldn't hold a cup, to being able to dance to hip hop again round my kitchen, which was always our aim. If you can get me to here, that would be amazing. So it's great to hear you talk about that because a lot of people have said to me, I don't believe you, that can't be possible. But you've just told us why that's possible. And the other thing which I think pharmaceutical practitioners don't look at no point when I was ill did anybody say to me, how's your life? What's going on in your life? I'd just lost my father. I'd lost my best friend. Those had tremendous negative impacts on me. I was feeling very lost and alone. And nobody asked me about my diet, because food has energy and it's so important that we put good energy into our bodies. So can you just talk to me a little bit about, or our listeners rather, about the energetic quality of food and why it's so important?
Well, this is perfect because this will go back to exactly what you asked me earlier about raising your vibration. Everything is vibration. So of course, whatever you take into you, that vibration is becoming associated with you. And it's much larger than just the chemical nature. It's the vibrational quality of that food. So when you eat an organic, healthy salad, that vibrational level is much different than going to McDonald's and getting a quick burger and fries to go. So those two things have vastly different vibrational structures. I think people realize that, but it's crucially important what's going into your body. The other area that I think is really fascinating, this goes back again to this idea of raising your vibration, is the body is 70% water, or up to 90 depending upon how you unravel the molecules. But you have a huge component of water in your system. And now water has been shown to have a memory. Water will hold an energetic imprint. It will take that, whatever energy that happens, it will become part of your water. So if you are in a space where you're influenced in an environment where it's a loving, caring environment, it's supportive and it's safe, then you have a totally different experience that's coming into your water than something where you're in a space where you don't feel secure, you don't feel safe, the environment is bombarding you with pollution and it's you're fearing for your life. Those are two different examples of an energetic influence that has a direct effect on your vibration. But back to the main point, where can you control it is you can choose what you eat. You can choose who you associate with. You can just choose to associate with people who have a positive energetic quanta, input into your system. So those choices are yours, and those things will raise your vibration. I mean, there's a number of other things that can be done, and that's a whole other topic we could spend hours upon, just all by itself.
Well, I think we've already established that you're going to have to come back and tell us more, Greg. But
Well,
this is an amazing subject. So, for some people that think what we're talking about is a bit far-fetched, tell me about what morphic fields are?
Okay, morphic fields, actually, it's an old idea. It's something that was generated back in the 1800s. But Rupert Sheldrake, he's a PhD biologist from Cambridge who wrote a book on morphic fields. Who the basic idea is one of the questions that came about with life was, okay, you have an embryo that's forming. It's going to become a human being. All right, it starts with two cells and they differentiate, they divide and they divide and they divide. But at some point they have to differentiate, meaning these cells have to go off and become a liver, this cell has to go off and become a brain, these group of cells have to go down here and become a foot. So they have to, even though they've all started as the same structure, the exact same thing, they have to divide and become into these different aspects of what a human is. And if you think about what we have, it's enormously complex. There's a lot of different options going on with those cells. So the concept came up that there's an energetic blueprint, if you will, and this is the morphic field. This is the field that says this is what the ideal human being should be. Here's what these cells should differentiate into. And the notion that right now, I think there's a big area that says, okay, genetics is all controlling this. Those cells divide and somehow those cells fire off the genes to become this particular part. But there's an enormous amount of research now that says, you know what, DNA is directly influenced epigenetically by the environment, by what's happening around, whether or not different parts of the chromosomes fire off, but also that DNA is a vibrational structure. You're down to the quantum physics level again when you start to talk about DNA. We're talking about something so tiny. It's a vibrational structure. It's not something solid and like, here's, we have this picture and I think, oh, I have these little springs running around in my body. That's not the case. These are vibrational structures. So they're like antenna and they're broadcasting individual signals that are occurring in your system. So the concept of the morphic field is there's this overall energetic imprint or overall blueprint, really is the better word, of what your body is supposed to be. This is the structure your body is supposed to have. It's an interesting concept. I highly recommend this book, Sheldrake's Morphic Fields.
Well, I hope you grab that, everybody. Make sure you buy that and start reading up on this because this is fascinating stuff. Now, following on from that, can you tell our listeners about the French experiment with DNA?
Now this one's interesting. Okay, so there was a wonderful guy by the name of Luc Montier. Well, hold on, I have to check my notes. Montier, and my French is terrible. So Montier is his name. This was about, I want to say, 3 or 4 years ago. He did an experiment, and it was fascinating. He's been studying. First, let me give you some backstory on him. He won the Nobel Prize in conjunction with another man for the discovery of the AIDS virus. So this is a renowned scientist. He's got the Nobel Prize. He can wear the little medal. He's a real scientist. He's not somebody off in the booties coming up with some crazy experiments. But he was influenced by another man by the name of, his name escapes me, but who 30 years earlier was convinced that water has a memory. So Montagnier became convinced that he wanted to go down this path because he really was fascinated by this concept. So here's what he did. He took water, tested pure water, nothing special, and he took some DNA. He happened to have a lot of DNA of AIDS patients around because he had been studying HIV. So he took some DNA and he put it in this test tube. And then he diluted it. I don't know if you're familiar with homeopathic remedies, but the concept is you dilute things down and down and down. And as you do this dilution that they would do with the water, you get to the point where there statistically is no DNA. There's nothing in that test tube but water. It's statistically impossible. You've diluted it so many times. You've taken just a little bit off of this one, added it to the next one. You've diluted this down so many times, there is no molecule of anything in there but water. So then he would take the water and he would measure it energetically. He would basically look at the electromagnetic frequencies coming from that. First, interestingly, he discovered that DNA has an electromagnetic energy output, which goes back to this concept of DNA having this vibrational energy. But more importantly, he was measuring this in these dilutions of water. So this water has a memory of having had that DNA, that vibration that was in it. But that doesn't stop him. He doesn't go, he goes further than this. So now he takes that DNA water and he uses a process that he basically converts the energetic frequencies that are happening into a wave audio file, into an audio file, basically. And he sends that to another lab across, actually in Spain. He's in France, he sent it to Spain. And the Spanish lab takes that audio file and it plays it to a test tube of water using a coil of energy so that it's imprinting this electromagnetic energy back into the water again. Then they took that water and they did a DNA test on it, standard DNA test. First off, the way the DNA test works, there has to be DNA present for the DNA test to work because there's two components that are needed to actually reconstruct DNA, to actually see what the DNA is. So the first thing that happened, which shocked everybody, was it reconstructed DNA. There's no relationship whatsoever to this other thing, other than purely energetic frequencies that were brought across and put into this water. So it recreated DNA, and everybody was shocked. This shouldn't happen. This is pure water. There's nothing in there. All we did was subject it to this electromagnetic energy for 1 hour. Then they took that and they said, okay, well, that's fascinating. Let's look at the DNA. What's the relationship back to this original DNA that we used? So they took and they went through and looked at the DNA pattern, and they got a 98% match of this DNA with the original DNA. That was what Montier used in his experiment. Now, 98% is more than enough to get you convicted at any court in the world for DNA. So there's no doubt about this, that this actually works. And it's repeatable. He's done this multiple times with multiple different labs on the receiving end of this experiment. So fascinating.
That is fascinating because I've read an awful lot of research by Dr. Emoto in Japan, who I think was the person you couldn't remember the name of. And, I don't know if you're familiar with the experiment where they took 2 glasses of water and one had hate on it and one had love on it. And, 1 glass of water every day, they were talking to it and saying, I love you, you're beautiful, you're amazing. And the other glass of water was going, I hate you, you're vile, you're horrible. And the glass of water that was given love remained fresh. And the glass of water that was given hate became sour, went rotten. I mean, can you expand on that? Because you're much more scientific than I am, and give our listeners a bit of a view about that. Because if we're I can't believe. So I don't know what happened.
Yeah, you got excited, I think.
Yeah, I knocked my computer off. So let me just start that again.
So you're on Emoto and you're talking about, the love-hate vibration being applied to water. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hold on just 1 second. I've just got to sharpen up my brightness again. There we go. Right, let's do that one again. So given that experiment that I've probably explained in very unscientific terms, can you elaborate on that for our listeners, being a much more scientifically based person?
Well, this goes back to the same concept we were talking about emanating vibrations, and vibrations are occurring and they're affecting matter. This is a fundamental, in my mind, a fundamental property of the universe. Now, obviously, the scientific community has a problem with that. They don't like to accept that because they still like this separation between me and everything else. But the reality is that your thoughts and your vibration has an effect on matter, has an effect on reality, has an effect on the world that's around you. And water, going back to that same experiment that we just heard about in France, is something that carries an energetic vibration. It wants to remember this vibration. It becomes infused. You can imprint water with this energies. Water's not the only thing you can imprint, by the way. I mean, back to the same idea. You can imprint matter, you can imprint everything. And just a quick aside here, when I was in my 20s, which was quite a while ago, I was working with a group of Native Americans in the US. I got involved with a group, and we would meet on the solstices and the equinoxes. And there was a wonderful shamanists who taught me a method that they use for imprinting crystals, how to energetically imprint a crystal so that you can capture the energy of the sun, the energy of the moon, what have you. Now, this is very radical stuff, especially the back when I was 20. So, but that concept is really what I think is really what happens in the universe. It's a base layer idea that energy, frequency, mental energy can imprint the reality around you. It has an effect on the reality around you. And there's people who, they've done studies with this. There's people who can, if you pick up some kind of a material object, they can tell you who's come into touch with that, whose frequencies have been sort of left behind on this material object. So there's much more going on here than commonly thought of. Reality is much, much more interesting in my mind than what the status quo seems to think about reality.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So, what is higher vibrational matter?
This is an interesting thing. So this gets back to that same idea where, and let, best I give you an example. I'm going to take the example of the cell phone, or the mobile phone, as you would say. So right now they're being manufactured, and they're being manufactured by robots, and they're basically, it's a very mechanical process, and the energy that goes into that manufacturer is, from an energetic standpoint, from my standpoint of vibrational energetics, it's just robots assembling something. So it has a base energy layer that's not exactly a high vibrational level, and it's being made strictly for the creation of money, which is, that's not a bad endeavor, but it's the only endeavor it has. So contrast that with something, for example, this is purely hypothetical, but imagine someone who made a cell phone by hand. They spent their time with it. And you probably can make the jump to a fine Swiss watch, okay? Someone you had this person who's meticulously assembling this watch, wants it to be absolutely perfect, spends the time to do this, and they create this masterpiece. Now, all of that energy that they have is infused in that watch. It's part of that watch. So this vibrational structure of that watch is much higher than your average cell phone that's been assembled by a bunch of robots, because there's a different level of interaction that's occurred by a conscious individual. So consciousness, and this is where it gets a little esoteric, but consciousness has a very direct influence on matter. It has a direct influence on your relationship to everything that happens in your environment. It has a direct influence on your vibrational level. It's really the key to understanding all of this interaction of vibration and reality.
This is such a fascinating conversation. So, what's next for you, Greg? I hear that you're working on putting positive frequencies, into a new app. Shall we talk about that just a little bit? I know it's not coming out for quite a few months yet, but can you tell us about that? Because I'm personally very excited about this.
Well, this goes back to the same idea that a frequency carries vibration. It's a vibration has information, and those things are carried by light and sound frequencies. So, for example, any light that's coming particularly from the sun, it has a vibration to it that's incorporating not only those frequencies, but again, this idea of the intentional energy that's behind that. That energy becomes infused with this other informational component. So the app that I'm coming about with is doing this. It's using sound and light and very specific frequencies. Yes, it's like a combination of frequencies, but there's also other informational structures that are imparted into that. So that when you use this app and you shine the light on your water, for example, and water's a wonderful thing to do, because we already know that water will absorb that, will absorb that information, will take it into its structure and hold that in there. So now you're presenting that water memory with something that's inherently positive for you as a person. And when you drink that water, it has that effect will be amplified throughout your system. So it's back to the same idea of vibration, frequencies, and information.
Well, I can't wait for that to come out. What other things will this app be able to do for us humans?
Well, it's you can also just apply it directly to your physical body itself, and have there. We've been doing some beta testing. We've been having other various people experiment with it, and we're seeing positive responses, particularly with increased circulation within your body just by strictly using the app. There's people who are very sensitive to heat and light, and they can feel this information that's coming in. So there's a lot of different uses for it, and we're still experimenting to discover everything that can be done. So I'll let you know as we progress.
Well, I can't wait to have you back to talk about that in a bit more detail, because that sounds like, you know, woo woo meeting technology and delivering real time positive effects on people. And, you know, with so many people suffering from anxiety and depression at the moment, we all need something to lift us up. So that sounds fantastic. So, Greg, what's next for you? What are you working on next? What's the next 5 years looking like for you? Because you're at the forefront of technology. To some people, this is going to sound a bit Star Trek. So take us on that journey into space. What are you going to be doing next?
Well, I have a combination. I have a very large multimedia project I'm putting together now. The, that's going to be, actually, we're calling it the Vibrant Stream, and it will be a combination of quantum energies and frequencies and vibrations with some of my original passion as a filmmaker. I'll be also incorporating some of that into it as well. So it's a kind of a mixture of things that will be coming out. But in terms of the future, really, I think the future is very bright for all of this area. I think more and more people are becoming aware that we are energetic beings. We are beings of vibration. And those things are most important, and they have a direct effect on how you heal, how you interact with your body, how your body interacts with you. So this whole area is going to expand tremendously. At least that's my hope. And I think
I,
with your help, I think it will definitely happen.
I hope so, because this is what I want people to realize. You know, it's not just the reality, isn't what we've been brought up to believe. There's an awful lot more out there. And that leads me on to this question. Um, Where do you get your inspiration from? How does it come to you? Because this is amazing stuff. And as I've already said, to some people it's beyond their comprehension. How does it come to you?
Well, that's a very interesting story. There's a lot of intricate connections that happen. About 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I had a major opening of my consciousness that really put me in tune with a connection to a higher source of information. And it's that connection has become much more alive for me, and it allows me to have a viewpoint that gives me the ability to see things. But it's not something unique. Everyone has this connection, but most people have not spent the time to really explore that and look for that. And it's, again, going back, my whole life has been about this exploration of how consciousness is really involved in what reality is. I mean, it's been a major question in my life to be from the beginning. What are we doing here? What's this all about? Why? There's more to it than just, okay, go work 9 to 5 at whatever your job is. There's much more going on here. So to me, it's been a journey, and it's a never-ending journey of finding more information and inspiration, and those things will always pop up. It goes back to the same thing about vibration. When you put out that vibration, it will attract whatever it is that you're looking for. So if you're looking for the meaning of life, that thing will come back to you. Just spend the time and watch for it.
No, I love that, because one of the things I say to my clients is, you know, it's all right. People, and a lot of people talk about manifesting, and
Mm.
you know, they'll say, "Oh, I'm trying to manifest this, or I'm trying to manifest that," but you've really got to believe that you've got it already, that you've already experienced it, and feel the emotions of that. But the other thing I say to people is, keep your eyes peeled, because it might not turn up exactly like you think it will. So, just to finish on this, how give me an example of how something extraordinary has turned up in your life when you've used this method of enticing something into your life through being on the right vibrational frequency?
Well, it's not, it's extraordinary is a relative term. I mean, I'll give you some examples of very small things, because to me, that's where the magic really is when you start to realize that these things are happening daily in your life. And they are. People don't realize that they're manifesting daily in their life. And it's not like you have to, oh, make this jump and all of a sudden now I have to start manifesting. You're manifesting all the time, nonstop, 24/7. You may be manifesting the same thing over and over again because you're stuck in this loop of where you believe reality is. But the truth is, you are manifesting that. So I can give you multiple examples. They tend to look like they're just, people say, oh, they're a coincidence. But just recently, the most recent one was, I was looking for a specific substance called NMN. It's a precursor to NAD, and it's anti-aging supplement, which I think I really need. So I'm currently living in Malaysia, right across the water from Singapore, and this substance is found. I can easily get it in Singapore, but I have a difficult time finding it in Malaysia. So I've been searching all around, and I put out this fiber. I'm thinking, I've got to find this. It must be here somewhere. There's got to be here somewhere. Where can I find this? So I jumped into a car just a couple weeks ago. It's called a Grab, but it's just like an Uber, same idea. I jumped into this Grab Uber, and the person had the radio on, and up popped a commercial. And this commercial talked about, now available in Malaysia. We have this new golden substance called NMN, and it's available now at this pharmacy right down here. But yeah, and that was the answer to my question. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Here's where it's now available. Go and get it. Well, it happened to be I was going down to the same area where the pharmacy is just upstairs from where I was going. I say happened, but that's the kind of synchronistic event. Now, most people will say, oh, that's just a coincidence. But no, that's actually that response of you putting out this vibration. Wow, I want this piece of information. Wow, I want to know this. I'm looking for that. It will come back. It's proven to me over and over. And I love the small ones because everybody's doing it already. They just don't realize that they're doing it.
Well, I totally agree. And with my clients, I'll say to them, why don't you try something simple, like getting a car parking space in London, which is nigh on impossible. And I did it with some friends of mine recently. We were going to a restaurant in the West End, parking's impossible. And I said, I'm going to drive there. They said, what? You're going to drive? You will never get parked. You'll spend 2 hours trying to find a parking space. I said, no, I won't. I've already put the word out to the universe that I want to park outside the restaurant. And they just burst out laughing. Anyway, we drove into London and we got to the restaurant and there were no parking spaces as we drove up. And they were all in the back going, there you go. I told you it wouldn't work. Literally, as the last person was laughing about it, a huge great Bentley pulled out in front of us and left me an enormous space to get into right in front of the restaurant. And I was like, there you go. That's the power of engaging the universe. It really does work. And they were like, oh my God,
Exactly.
you're a witch. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm just using vibrational frequency and putting it out there and it's coming back to me in the way I want it. So I could talk to you all day, and I very much hope that when your app's on the market, that you'll come back and talk to us about that, because that sounds
Oh,
very
definitely.
exciting. But
Definitely.
as a last thing to our listeners, what would you say to them about engaging in vibrational frequencies? Or have you got any last thoughts that you'd like to share with everyone?
I think probably my last thought is this sounds like it's from outer space in a lot of ways, this whole concept. But in reality, this is how everything works. Everything is vibration. Everything is this interconnected mesh of vibration. And when you put out those vibrations, those things will have implications and come back to you in your environment. So all you have to do is start opening your eyes and watch for it, and you'll see things. Just one other quick aside. I remember when I was young, my father owned a car parking company, and I used to park cars, which reminded me of your story because we used to park in North Beach of San Francisco, which was similar to downtown London. It was impossible, but we always found parking places because we knew they were going to be there. So you would just go out and find the right spots all the time, and it became, something that you could just click through, and oh, got to go over there. There it is. Anyway, the concept is of I remember one time specifically, I was standing in a parking lot working, and a leaflet blew up and wrapped around my leg. Well, this was right after I'd read a book about this person who happened to find a leaflet that came to them, and it gave them a entree into someone who had some information for them. This particular leaflet had little things you could tear off on it. Back in the old days before we had apps that could communicate with people. So this particular person was a psychic who was in tune with a lot of different versions of reality. And at this time in my life, I was like, oh, this is, BS. But I took one of those off and went to see them, and it would prove to be a very change, something that changed a lot of my thinking at a very particular moment in time that was important. So watch what blows your way.
I love that. I love that, Greg. Well, sadly, we've come to the end of our time together. And I just want to thank you because this has been a really fascinating conversation. So, where can our watchers and our listeners find you if they want to find out more?
Well, unfortunately, I keep a very low profile. You're very difficult to find me. I don't have a lot of social media. I will be, like I say, I will be launching the Vibrant Stream shortly. Right now, there's not much there, but in the next couple of months, it will start to manifest. So that will probably be the easiest way to find me.
That's fantastic. Well, you heard it here. We're very, very lucky to have Greg Becker, who is a meister of vibrational frequencies, join us today. Make sure you check out the Living Matrix, and keep watching because Greg's going to be coming back in a future episode to share more of this incredible information with us. This is WTF. What's the frequency? And Greg Becker, I can't thank you enough. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for spending the time. I really appreciate it.